Now, kiln wash, as you know, is to keep glaze and clay from your pots from sticking to your kiln shelves. You want to protect kiln shelves as much as possible because they are expensive. They're hard to replace. 50, 60, 80 bucks. I paid 65 for this. It adds up quick. It's not something that you want to have to replace. Also, you want to make sure that you can save your pots. When clay and glaze get stuck, a lot of times what happens is what we call plucking. Plucking happens more often with porcelain that becomes glass-like, but also stonewares and earthenwares, where you have clay bodies melting, or you have glazes melting and attaching itself onto the shelf. And when you go up and pick, it more or less takes the bottom out. You have shards that stick. So the bottom of your pot is completely gone, okay? So that's what's plucking. This is very common with glazes and porcelain. If the glaze gets stuck, and then the porcelain will also be stuck, and you won't have a bottom. So kiln wash is to protect both your shelves and your pottery. With that being said, those are the two things we really need to think about when we do kiln wash, is our shelves and our clay and glaze. Those are actually major factors in deciding what type of kiln wash we need. That's right, kiln wash is almost like a prescription. I think there are basics in kiln wash making, basic components, but it's good to kind of modify a little bit, maybe add something more and take something less, and consider all parts to make sure that you have the best that you can have. The questions that I have received about issues that people have, potters have about kiln wash, is that it's either too powdery, so it doesn't really adhere, or it's flaky. And we all know what happens when we have flaky kiln wash. It splinters off, it drops or sticks to the glaze, to the pots, and it's a permanent blemish because it's not going to burn, it's not going to melt like a flux would. Those are two application and recipe issues that we find. Often you'll find a recipe that calls for a 50-50 balance. So you have 50% of one component and 50 of the other. I don't think that's ever true for any situation. I think that's why you're going to have those issues, particularly when it comes to flaking. You have a lot of recipes that say EPK or Kilian 50% and silica the other 50%, or alumina hydrate the other 50%. Now, alumina is going to be the largest component, but when paired with 50% of EPK or Kilian, you're going to have flaking. Why? Because EPK is not a flux of any sort. It doesn't move. It doesn't have really a melting point. So it's going to contract and expand. It's going to have moisture. That's why we have calcined EPK. It's when they do a high firing of the EPK and they break down the molecule structure. A lot of people do not know this, but this is why we need to use calcined EPK along with the EPK, because it allows for our ingredients not to shrink and cause flaking, etc. The reason why we need EPK, because it actually helps to bind to our refractory shelves, and also helps to float the silica and aluminum hydrate that we need. It's very important to, whenever we have a part of EPK, we have a part of calcined EPK. Silica is really great. It has a lower temperature. It's a great stabilizer. So that's something that we use in kiln wash. The major component in a good kiln wash is alumina hydrate. The same thing that's in our kiln shelves is alumina hydrate, and should also be included, if not the larger part included, in our kiln wash. Now, alumina hydrate can actually be used as a powder. You don't even need to wash it on your kiln shelves. You can sprinkle on, and that way you have a worry-free mess, right? Worry-free. You don't have to worry about it. You could actually reuse it because it doesn't have any type of melting point, okay? So, well, it does have a melting point, but it's like 42, it's like cone 42, okay? So you're not going to be dealing with that at all. Now, the issue with sprinkling is, well, because it's messy, and if you're unloading and loading often, well, it's going to be dusty. It's not going to be good for the lungs, number one. Number two, it's going to be really hard to manage something that's so easily airborne because it could get onto your pots. Okay, so we have another issue there. But we need aluminum hydrate in our kiln wash. That's why we use EPK, which is both a stabilizer and a bonding agent, and we also use silica. The recipe that I call for, that I invite you to use for both stoneware and porcelain glaze, is simply 2 parts alumina hydrate, 1 part EPK or any other kaolin, 1 part of EPK that's calcined, and the last part is silica. So you're looking at 40% alumina hydrate along with the other 3 ingredients. Now it's very important not just to say, oh, EPK is EPK. No, we need to have the other, the calcined, because that is free from any type of bondage of molecule that would otherwise be trapped by water and would contract and expand and cause flaking. So we need all 4 of those. This is the best mixture that I have found, the best recipe that I've found for both my stoneware and my porcelains. Oftentimes when you have a 50-50 type of recipe, or a high silica, sometimes just a high EPK. Either way, you're going to have that in most kiln washes. Is if you're dealing with a high flux firing, such as soda or salt or wood fire, that flux environment is going to cause that to melt. Number 1. Number 2, if you're doing high fire porcelains, that type of glaze recipe is more prone to actually melt along with that high fire porcelain or glazes. So that's why I find it so important to use 4 of these ingredients. It's stable and it's not going to melt. It's good for both stoneware and porcelain, of course, earthenware. So when we were dealing with our powdered glaze wash, we always want to make sure that we wear a respirator, but I'm outside so I'm not worried about it. And it's normally about 1 part water and 1 part powder. However, it's always good to start off with less water and then add water as you go. It's good to slowly add your powdered elements into the water so you don't get clumps. So it should relatively look like a glaze would. It's a little bit too thin, but I do have stuff on the bottom that I need to move around. I put a little bit too much too quickly. So if you go on Amazon, you can get these Japanese, what I call pan handle bamboo brushes. And this is what I like to wash my kiln shelves with. It allows you to have a good width on your stroke, but also fine enough for you to really grab that kiln wash, and it is in a controlled way, and it's just thin enough where you can have enough kiln wash, but also in a way that's not going to create inconsistencies as you drag the paintbrush that would otherwise cause cracking or flaking as you work with it. I try to keep my kiln wash from being painted over 1/4 inch from the edge. And this just allows us to make sure that if it were to ever flake off after many firings, that it's not going to land in a pot when we handle the shelves. So as you can tell, it's very thin. I had to go back and forth. I can't go too quickly, but that's what you want. You want an even, thin coat. What I like to do is do 2 coats. Remember, they're thin, so 2 coats almost right away. And that way you're not going to see anything but the kiln wash itself, so there's not going to be any type of translucent revealing spots where you can see the shelf itself. I let all the kiln shelves dry overnight. It's important to have them dry in a warm place overnight, since you're not going to have the sun. So to cure these in the kiln by firing, you only need 20 minutes to reach a temperature of 500 degrees Celsius. That's roughly 932 degrees Fahrenheit, which is just under cone 022, which is the smallest cone that you can get. Therefore, really what you need is just to warm it up and then go to a high of medium if you're doing a manual, a medium, and let that rest on medium for 20 minutes. Now what I do is, specifically if you do still have moisture in the shelf, or on the shelf if you will, is to allow a good 20-minute warm up on low, allow some of that moisture to escape. Okay, so here's a chart for our reference. As we warm up the kiln, it's going to be dark, dark, dark. We're going to see some progress in regards to our purpose at 752 degrees Fahrenheit, or 400 Celsius, and it's between the 480 to 700 that chemical water, or the gases, or the water smoke is actually driven off, which is what we want. We start to cure our kiln wash at 932 degrees. What we're going to see is a dull red glow. So I take the 1-inch column and I just go ahead and stack them up. You just need enough room to have the kiln wash dry, right? Cure. One thing that I didn't mention is a lot of potters will choose to do a coat, let that dry, or even put them in the kiln and dry them, and then they do the second coat. Many potters will decide to do 3 coats on a bisque, and then after every other fire, go ahead and add another layer to it, right? Because this does slowly begin to burn, so it gets a little bit thinner. Sometimes potters want to go ahead and use a bisque, fire a whole bunch of bisque, and then do their glaze, so they will not really worry about kiln wash on the bisque. However, we still have to think about a little bit of contraction and expansion of the piece, and you don't want the foot of your piece to grab anything. Specifically, you want to make sure that you have your kiln wash up to par, because you have to have good kiln wash hygiene and maintenance, because you do not want, especially during a glaze firing, for a glaze to stick only because, well, it started to flake and you didn't take care of it, or you have some glaze on your kiln shelf and you're like, well, you know, it's not a lot. It's just a good practice either way to go ahead and maintain a really well kept kiln shelf.